All right, so here's the third and final recording for December 2nd. So the next piece we're going to talk about is cells. So cells are the basic building block or unit of all living things. So there's some ideas to this. One of the ideas to this is this idea of, or it's the cell theory, right? So the cell theory states that all cells come from other cells, okay? It's kind of like the chicken and the egg, you know, if you've ever heard that expression. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, it's hard to say, but we know that eggs come from chickens, or chickens make the eggs, and from the egg comes chickens. So it's hard to determine what came first, the cell or the cell. Anyway, so there's this idea of the cell theory. All cells have some basic parts. Well, some of the basic parts that you find in cells is a cell membrane. Is one basic part that all cells will have. Doesn't matter what kind of cell you are, all cells have a cell membrane. And this membrane separates the cell from everything else around it. Once again, they're the basic units of all life on Earth, and all cells come from other cells. All right, so going back to this idea of the chicken or the egg, you had to have at some point one cell before you had a second cell, right? So the question is, where did the first cell come from? We don't know. What do cells do? So cells do all the basic things that your body does. So, for example, if we think about some of the things that you have to do, daily, you have a need for food, right? You have a need for oxygen. You have a need to get rid of waste, and the waste might be, CO2 that we breathe out. It could be, a liquid waste or solid waste that we get rid of. Cells do all the same kind of things that we do, just on a much, much, much smaller scale. When we talk about cells, we're going to talk about there are organelles. Organelles are small organs. So there are these organs inside of cells that are very small. Think of you have your own organ systems or own organs, such as your brain, your heart, your lungs, your liver, your stomach. Each one of those things has a specific function. Well, the same thing in cells. These organelles, like small organs, will have some type of a function. Okay, what do? They help cells carry out whatever function that they do, whatever their goal is. For example, cells of the liver, they're gonna be used to detoxify things that come inside of our body. Cells of the heart, they're muscular cells that are gonna expand and contract to allow the heart to pump and move blood around the body. So some basic functions, right? Same thing. Once again, it's the same thing that we do. They eat, they grow, they reproduce. Right? This is pretty much what all life on Earth does. You have to eat, you have to grow, you have to reproduce. It cells do all these basic things. Okay. There are different parts of the cells that help carry out those, and we'll talk about some of those as we go. You don't need to know them all, but some of the basic ones would be important. If we look over here to the right-hand side, there's a list of these organelles. Here are some real basic ones that I'm going to highlight, and these basic ones are these 4 or 5 in particular are very important for daily function. Excuse me. Oh, God, sorry, I'm so tired. So there are some cells that don't have a nucleus, but for cells that do have a nucleus, cells that have a nucleus, which is this first one I've highlighted, stores DNA. And DNA is that genetic material that you got from your parents. Okay? So it's the instruction code to make you you. The other thing that cells do is cells make proteins. Well, proteins are made by these things called ribosomes. Lysosomes are like the stomach of the cell. This allows it to digest foods that come in. Cell membrane, think of it as kind of like, similar to your skin or the outside of the cell. Okay. And the mitochondria, its job is to make energy. Okay. So we have all these kind of functions here. I'm not saying the other ones aren't important, but these 5, if you had to know 5, if you had to know a few, these are the 5 I think that are the most important to know. Now, keep that in mind, excuse me, Man, some of these parts work really kind of, granted, if you look at the first term, this, I have an idea of organelle. All of these things here are organelles. So all of these here, 1 through 11, are all organelles except the last, except the last two things. The last two things are processes, but these are all types of organelles. Last two that you see there, these are processes. These processes allow things to move. This allows stuff. It's for movement of, and when I say stuff, it could be anything in and out of a cell. Okay. Specific stuff would be osmosis. That would be how water gets in and out of cells. Okay. We can talk about some other connections up here. This thing called the ER is connected to ribosomes, so it has to deal with proteins. Okay, ribosomes. And we can say that we can make some other connections here. We can say that a vacuole or lysosome is a type of vacuole. It's a package that's inside. And then the last piece here, this cytoplasm, this is like the liquid portion of the cell. So when you look inside the cell, this is like all the inside parts kind of together. So we're going to look, here's a typical animal cell. So the way we know it's an animal cell is that animal cells are missing some things, is one of the ways we can tell. And they miss certain things. For example, animal cells do not have something called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are only found in plant cells. It's what makes plants green. Think of the green color in plants. Okay. A second thing that plant cells have that animal cells don't have is something called the cell wall. A cell wall gives them rigidity, makes plants rigid, kind of like, think of like a tree. Okay. And another thing that would be found inside of plants that's not found inside of animals is something called a water vacuole. And so plants are very reliant upon water. So plants would have this thing called a water vacuole, which is a water storage component of the cell. So if we don't see those things, I have an awful time today. If we don't see any of these three things, we know it's a plant cell. Oh, I'm sorry, an animal cell. And once again, this is water storage. Okay. All right. Here we go with these differences. Now, if we're talking about these are missing in animal cells. And if we were talking about plant cells, we could say the same thing. We could say that plant cells have those things as opposed to not have those things. Are there some specific parts that are found in animal cells and that are not in plant cells? Yeah, there are. But those, it's easier to know that these items here are not found in plant cells. I'm sorry, not found in animal cells and are in plant cells. So once again, here are some of those differences, right? So there's a cell wall that wraps all the way around. Now, plant cells still have a cell membrane like all cells do, but they have this wall that makes them rigid. Another thing, they're going to have these green things here. There's a chloroplast. There's one right there. Okay. The other part that they're not showing you here that I talked about was this water vacuole. There's this central vacuole here, and in here is where water is stored. Okay. Awesome. Once again, my awful handwriting, I apologize. Kind of missed that part of third grade. Okay. Cool. So, once again, first question is animal or plant cell. This particular thing is going to be an animal cell, because when I look here at the list of parts, I don't see the three things we talked about earlier. So let's talk about each one. We'll kind of label them as we go. So here's the nucleus. Nucleus means center. Okay. Atoms, we talk about atoms at some point, they'll have nucleus as well. Mitochondria are these kind of things that look like hot dogs. Right? They're all kinds of little folds inside here like that. Those are all mitochondria. These help produce energy for the cell. Okay. This is called the Golgi body. This is the Golgi body. The Golgi body is like the post office. Post office delivers and ships things. That's what they're going to do. This guy is like the brain of the cell, has all the instructions. Mitochondria, they call it the powerhouse of the cell. What's it do? It makes energy. Okay. The outside of the cell is the membrane. This is this part here. Once again, it's like the skin. It keeps what's outside, inside, keeps the inside. We already hit Golgi. So there's this, I'm going to use a highlighter here. There's all this space in here, like this, all this kind of space. All this stuff here. All this space in here that we see all over the place. All over the place. This space here, this is the cytoplasm. It's like a liquidy background that everything floats in. Kind of think of it as like Jello. We have this thing called the ER. The ER are these things that are kind of connected to the nucleus. So they're, let me grab a different color here. So the ER is going to be kind of, I'm going to draw purple. So this is the ER right here. It's all the stuff connected to the nucleus. All right, so it's intimately attached to the nucleus. It stands for endoplasmic reticulum, but ER is okay for us. Okay, and then the last part would be ribosomes. These are small parts. These are very, very small. Okay, and these ribosomes are these tiny little dots that you see all over the cell. These little tiny dots all over the cell. These are all ribosomes. Okay, ribosomes make protein, which cells need to survive. Cool. So plant or animal cell. So we're looking for certain terms. So this guy has a cell wall. This guy has a vacuole. And this guy has a chloroplast. So this one is going to be a plant cell. So the first thing, we'll do the cell wall. This outer portion here, this is the cell wall. It gives this plant shape, rigidity, structure. Animals do this by having skeletons. So that would be the cell wall. This guy here. All right, right inside the cell wall. So it's hard to, oops, let me go back one there. It's hard to see, right? But there's this little line, this little black line that runs all the way inside, right inside the cell wall. That's the cell membrane. Once again, all cells are going to have a membrane. They need this membrane in order to separate what's outside and inside. They also have mitochondria. Notice that there are these little hot dog looking things, the lines inside these folds. Why do they have mitochondria? Plants need energy too. So I'm going to cross them off as we go. And we got cell membrane. Nucleus, center of the cell right there. Kind of the same idea, very, very similar. Okay. Ribosomes, those are those tiny little dots that are all over the place. Some of them are on the ER, some of them are just kind of floating everywhere. So those are ribosomes. Let's see if I can find a couple good ones. I guess we'll use that as ribosome over here, this little guy. Once again, they need to make proteins as well. So we get this is really tough to see, but there's this kind of clear kind of thing here. This here is that water vacuole. Okay, here's that water vacuole. They don't call it a water vacuole, they're just calling it a vacuole, but that's okay. This particular vacuole stores water. If it had food in it, it would be a food vacuole. If it was if it had enzymes, it would be called a lysosome. So we got ribosome already. Let's cross that guy off. Once again, we talked about the ER is like this area that is, let me grab a different color. We'll get something totally different. This is the ER right here. Once again, it's really closely associated with the membrane. Okay, so it's going to have a lot to do with what the nucleus is going to do. So that's the ER. Cytoplasm, that's that liquidy background. Okay. I'm going to have this guy over here. This is the Golgi. It's again the post office of the cell. If I could spell Golgi. And then the last part there is the mitochondria. Okay. If I go through and I look at things that are the same, so once again, we said there are 3 parts that are only found here on plant cells, not animal cells. So the vacuole, the cell wall, and the cell membrane are plant-only kind of thing. Plants and animals will have cytoplasm, mitochondria, nucleus, mitochondria. Again, whoops, I got mitochondria in there twice. Huh. That was a mistake. We'll come back and fix that guy right now. This is not the mitochondria. It looks very similar to it, but that other one we were talking about there, that's a plant only, is chloroplast. All right. See, if we were live, I'm sure you guys would have caught my mistake, right? Chloroplast. And we go back here, and all cells have a cell wall, so we're going to color that in purple. Okay, so all cells have a cell wall. I think we did pink, actually. All cells have Golgi. All cells have ribosome. All cells have ER. So those are common in all cells. So the purple or pink are all cells. Okay. In the case of the green, these are things that are found in only plant cells. Okay. Excellent. Once again, here's another example. Just once again, a different type of cell, just another shape, no big deal. And as I look through this, notice I don't see cell wall. I don't see that. I don't see chloroplast. And I don't see a vacuole. Okay, so because I don't see any of those, well, it does have a vacuole, but not a water vacuole. Because I don't see any of those, this must be an animal cell. Okay, so what do the parts do? Let's talk about some of them. So mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. Makes energy. Vacuole, storage, whatever the cell happens to be making or needing. Golgi, it's like the post office, right? It's going to deliver things. The nucleus is the brain. Tells everybody what to do. It has DNA inside. Ribosomes, these guys, make protein. Cytoplasm is kind of that liquid background. And everything floats in it. So all parts kind of float in it. Think of it as like a shock absorber for all those parts. Cell membrane, it's like the skin. It determines what's in and out. And microvilli, this is a new one. It's got these tiny little extensions here. All these little things are microvilli. Microvilli, these extensions, okay, that are sticking up all over the place, their job is to add more surface area. You find these in cells like in your intestines or your stomach. Why? It helps you absorb more. We'll just call it, once again, stuff by adding surface area. Okay. A couple more terms here. Yeah, we'll get through a few more of these, I think. So a couple more terms here. And we're probably going to stop once we get to this point here. So diffusion. So there's a couple terms here, osmosis and diffusion. Diffusion is a process by which, once again, I'm going to use stuff. Doesn't matter what the stuff is. This stuff is going to move. So in the case of diffusion, stuff, no matter what the things we're talking about are always going to move from where there are more to where there are less. Okay. We can think about this, and it'll stop when equal. So here's a good example. So if we look at this particular diagram, we'll look at number. Here's a membrane. So here's a cell. Okay. Here's the same membrane. Okay. What they're showing you with the arrows is, once again, stuff. These little tiny molecules are going to move inside. All right. How do they get inside? They can pass through the membrane. They have to be small, though. Okay. In this case, they must be small enough they can move inside the membrane, and they're going to keep moving in until there's an equal number outside and inside. And this is called diffusion. If the thing moving is water, then we have a new name for it. We call it osmosis. We'll say if the stuff is water. Okay? You could use this with anything. For example, let's say alcohol. If you're having an adult beverage, all right, and there's alcohol molecules, and these are the alcohol molecules here, right? The alcohol molecules are going to move from outside your cells to inside your cells until there's an equal amount inside and outside. Or if you're drinking water, if you're dehydrated, the water will go in through osmosis from where there's more to where there's less. So let's see, here's the opposite situation. So in this case, once again, still have a membrane here. Okay, here's our membrane. Okay, and in this case, there's more stuff inside and there's less outside. As opposed to here, there was more outside and less inside. Well, in this case, the stuff, if it's small enough, will leave the inside until, once again, we have an equal amount on the outside and the inside. Okay, this is osmosis and diffusion. Let's try a couple more. Actually, no, I'm going to stop here, I think. I think this is a good place for us to stop tonight. I'm going to send these videos out to you. Hopefully this will be helpful. I'll also email you and text you this information as well.